So part two of this, I was in the hospital for about a month. I had suffered actually renal failure, liver failure. During this time in the hospital, I also got pancreatitis. I was really on death's doorstep. I have an autoimmune disease, or a few of them, but one of the deadly ones or life-threatening ones is called Addison's disease. I don't produce any cortisol or adrenaline, so I have to take steroids to stay alive. Needless to say, part of the reason I was in the coma for so long was they didn't know that I had Addison's disease until that they could track down my wallet, which had my name in it. So I believe they called my mom and figured out, although she was in Virginia, who I was and that I had been to this hospital before. So they pulled up my records, and my mom was telling them she has Addison's disease, she needs steroids, gave me the steroid dose that was appropriate for that type of trauma, and I eventually kind of got back to living. And it was a really difficult struggle. Not only obviously physically, I had home health nurses, I had a catheter in, a walker, a neck brace. I could not drive, obviously, had to have surgery for some broken bones. So it was a long physical recovery. And then the cognitive recovery was intense. It was a lot of different sounds that I had to listen to, kind of like EMDR, where they play different sounds at different octaves, try to get my brain to work again. I mean, I am a really good cook. You guys see my Instagram, you guys see how much I cook, and I couldn't figure out how to turn the oven on. Like, I couldn't figure out, looking at the picture of which burner to turn on to which stove top it correlated to. So it was a real struggle, and it was hard for me to find my words. I felt like I knew what I wanted to say, but I just couldn't recall the right word. I couldn't figure out how to end a sentence. I'm a fast talker, you guys know that. But it was really hard for me to string together thoughts, and it took years to recover. And I'm still physically recovering. I have life-sustaining illnesses and pains and all sorts of things from that accident, but it really changed my life, and I knew that I was meant for bigger things. I loved being a social worker, but felt like I couldn't truly do what I was meant to do as a social worker. The insurance really restricts what we can do for our clients. And I was reading a book, and it was about a death doula, and I thought it was amazing, and I felt really called to that space. I'm kind of like the phone a friend when things go wrong in people's lives. They're like, oh, well, Mikey will know how to fix it. And if she doesn't know how to fix it, she can just hold space for me or be there for me. And so I felt like becoming a death doula was my calling. I knew that I was meant for more, as I heard this voice say to me. And I knew that if I was going to really push myself and try to work, even though it is part-time, it needed to be for a purpose. It needed to be for a bigger reason. And yes, being a social worker did that, but not to the ability that I wanted to. So long story short, I took, several months, going back to school and getting my Reiki certifications, and then my death doula certifications, and my grief coaching certifications. And it's been a journey. It's been one little baby step at a time, but I wanted to share this to say, that sometimes the hardest situations can be the biggest blessing. During that recovery, I was being looked after by a friend of mine, one of my best friends growing up, and he was not in a good place at the time. He was doing a lot of drugs and stole a lot of my money, my resources, stole my identity, and also sexually assaulted me for days. And it was my true friends that knew something was really wrong and came to my rescue. And that was another really big traumatic experience in my life, kind of compiled with this other one. And it took me a long time to work on myself and heal my body, my mind, my soul, deal with these traumatic events, and somehow alchemize them into doing something meaningful and purposeful in my life. So if you stuck around this long, I appreciate you listening to this part one and part two story of how I became to be here and what my near-death experience was. Overcoming the kidney failure, the liver failure. Like, the doctors couldn't believe I had a creatinine of like 10, and that is really, really high if you know anything about kidney function. And I'm a miracle. I'm a miracle to be here today, and I'm not scared of these hard places that a lot of us are going to experience when it comes to grief and death and dying. I've done it. I've died. I've come back, and I'm grateful to be in these sacred spaces. I'm grateful to help people, and I really do know what it's like to need care and need support, and really just rely on somebody you don't know, a nurse, an aide, a CNA, a death doula, a hospice nurse. it takes a lot to surrender, and it is my mission and my goal to make sure that every patient that I love and care for at their end of life feels comforted, feels safe, feels respected, and has their dignity, and that they can rest easy knowing that I'm there, not only for them, but for their families. So thank you guys for letting me share this story, and I'm grateful to be here.